This is good. Um, I did my first 7 sessions this week, so it's the most sessions I've done so far. Picked
Nice.
up like one of Bailey's clients when he was away,
Yeah.
and then catching up on one client that I missed last week. So yeah, it's been good.
Okay. Nice, mate. Just building steadily, getting there.
Yeah.
Good, man. Good to hear. Good to hear. Okay, so today we do more nutrition. Let me get the mind map happening. 1 second. Share screen. Okay. You guys see the mind map?
Yeah.
Yep. Awesome. All right. Quick review. Okay, so the hierarchy of nutritional principles when we're setting nutrition for our clients. If fat loss and body recomposition is the goal, so if there's some element of fat loss, remember the most important thing to have in place is the energy balance. We need a deficit of energy, so the body is forced to tap into its stored energy supplies and burn some fat. So initial energy balance is the most important thing. Get that set up. Then we set our macros, get the macronutrient ratio. We know the system for doing that is we set protein first, and we'll go and review our protein numbers as well. Then we can either set fats or carbohydrates, but we get protein in place. I then assign fats, and then the leftover calories we assign to carbohydrates. So once you've got the energy balance in place, you set your macros up, then we look at food quality, micronutrient density, and get them eating as many whole foods as we possibly can. And then the next on the list, and the least important out of all of these, it will be meal timing. So how can we structure their nutrition plan so it works well around their lifestyle and around their training? And if they are in a deficit of energy and they're pushing a little bit harder, ensuring that they have enough good food around the workout window to make sure they're fueled enough and have enough energy to train well and do well. So that's where the meal timing comes into place. But remember, in the context of overall energy balance, whether they eat all their food in 3 meals or 6 meals, if the energy balance is there, it all sort of gets there in the end. Does that all make sense?
Yeah.
Good with that? Okay. So last week we found out that we didn't really know what BMR was and the calories per gram for the macronutrients. So we'll have a little run over that. So we discussed the basal metabolic rate. And so this is the rate of energy expenditure of a person at rest. So if you have no nutrition and no physical activity and you're lying in a hospital bed, then your basal metabolic rate is the amount of energy in calories that you need to keep yourself sustained and keep all of your systems and functions of the body going. And so when you guys are working with your clients, you get your nutrition template out and you punch in the numbers, and that gives you a BMR. So all the calculations are done for you. So it's not essential to know the formulas of how to calculate it manually, but you need to know the concept, and you punch that in, and that number that it gives you is the BMR of the client. And then we know we go on to multiply that basal metabolic rate by the activity ranges or the activity level that your client's doing. So this is where you first start making an assessment of how many calories to give the client. And the ranges typically we use for that are between 1.2 and 1.9. So if you have a very sedentary client and they're not doing much activity and they're sitting at the desk all day, we can go that lower end, the sedentary end. So their BMR, if it's a female, maybe it's 1,300 calories. We times that by 1.2 if they're sedentary. And that will give us a rough idea for starting calories. If they're a little bit more active and they're training 3 or 4 times a week, we might be able to go a little higher, times the BMR by 1.5. And if you're working with an athlete, someone who's a laborer or something like that, and they're super active and doing 15,000 steps a day and a couple of workouts and all sorts of stuff, then we could go to the top end of that and times their BMR by 1.9. But typically for your general pop clients, you guys will be working in the sedentary and moderately active kind of ranges when we're doing the BMR. So that all makes sense?
Yep.
Yep. All good. Okay. So this quick one on the calories per gram. This is really simple. A couple of you guys are on it, and a couple need to just get familiar with it, but it's really basic. So a gram of protein is 4 calories. Fat is the most dense in energy of all the macronutrients. So you get 9 calories per gram for a gram of fat. carbohydrates are 4, same as protein, and then alcohol, the outlier at 7 calories per gram. Okay, so that's all good. So these are just basic fundamentals that we as trainers should be able to rattle off at the top of our heads when communicating with clients, right? All making sense? Yep. Good. Okay, so that's our big picture stuff. We'll do a quick review of protein. We'll just go straight to why it's important of the body. So we know that it supports all of the systems of the body, and the main systems we have: the digestive system, the immune system, the reproductive system, the endocrine system, the musculoskeletal system. So every major system of the body needs protein. We know that protein are made of amino acids. And so the amino acids that you eat a piece of protein, you digest that in the gut, you get the amino acids start to circulate in the blood, leave the gut, get into the bloodstream and circulate. They go around and do all these things. Your hair, your skin, your nails, everything that goes on in the body uses some level of protein. And so that's all before we start building muscle and recovering from workouts. So this is why having the appropriate amount of protein for a training or an athletic population is important, because they need to function as a human, and then they need surplus left over to recover, build muscle, and perform. So this is the rationale that we use when talking to the clients as to why we're always getting them to eat more protein. That all makes sense? Any questions there? No, we're all good. Okay. So the ranges, now we'll just go straight to the MPH range here, the 1.8 to 3. So I had that at 3.2. For some reason, I thought I heard someone say the range was 1.8 to 3.2, but I spoke to Mick during the week, and the range that you guys use is 1.8 to 3. So basically, you're getting your client's scale weight, timesing that by 1.8 will give you the minimum amount that they need, times their scale weight by 3, and then you've got the top end of protein that you would assign to them. That all makes sense? Yeah.
Yep.
So if we set calories first, you then assign protein. What are some of the, Josh, what are some of the factors that you might take into consideration when you're looking at that range of protein? What would help you determine whether a client gets the lower end, like the minimum amount of protein, or a higher end up near 3 grams per kilo of body weight?
If the client is looking for more of more like their goal is to lose weight, so they're in more of a deficit, to give them more of like the lower end. And then like more on like a higher end if they're more active, physical.
Yeah.
So the protein can more protein for people who are more active, so it can repair more for their body.
Yeah, so I guess if they're more active, there's more breakdown of tissue, there's more need for repair and recovery. So that's good. When you have someone on lower calories, your instinct is correct that the lower end of the protein range is good if you're trying to pull calories down, because it keeps overall calories low. But sometimes in the presence of a deficit of overall energy, having protein slightly higher can actually be a good thing in terms of their. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and then protein is more filling as well. So yeah, makes sense.
Yes. So so you also have that. You have the satiety. So you're kind of looking at I'll ask Bailey, what do you use with the client that influences how much protein you give them?
So what Josh was saying, I would say as well, but I sometimes mainly think of how much muscle mass they have as well, to be able to maintain the muscle that they have. Would obviously be then more on the larger side. So if someone came in that's mixed size, I would clearly go on the heavier side.
Yeah.
To be able to at least just maintain what they have. And of course, like Josh was saying, depending on their goal. So of course, if they want to go, cool, I just want to come in, I want to build and I want to grow muscle. So you would put a little bit more focus on how much protein they are having.
Mm-hmm.
Then comparing to someone that would just go, oh, fat loss, I want to be in a deficit. Then you, like Josh said, you'd go more maybe on the minimum side, again, depending how much muscle mass they have.
Yeah. I like all that. That's all good. Dana, what's your system when you're assigning protein?
So this is kind of going off of what Bailey said, but depending on how much muscle they do have and how much experience they have in the gym as well. So if there's someone who's quite experienced and they have quite a bit of lean mass on them, then definitely more so on the higher end. But again, it would just depend on like who's in front of me. If there's someone who's more so a lifestyle client, doesn't have a lot of muscle on them, definitely more on the lower side because they'll be in a deficit anyways.
Yep. I like it. Jordo, what are your thoughts on all this?
Yeah, so it depends on a couple of factors. Obviously, we do the 1.83. If they're looking to build, I tend to go lower actually on the protein just because it keeps them hungry that I can fill in with more carbs. So if I'm either meeting, say, 5,000 calories, I'm going to have lower protein just because I need their hunger to be there to get all that food in.
Nice.
With the carb effect of protein sparing. If they're in a deficit, I'll go higher because they're in a deficit, they're getting less calories. I want to curb the hunger there. And also I look at hunger as a factor as well. So I've got a guy who's building at the moment. I don't want to push his calories too much further at the moment because I don't want to put on too much fat at once. I want to keep the rise in scale weight to a minimal. So I've actually got a mid-range of protein there just to keep him feeling full until I'm ready to give him more calories in the form of carbs.
Okay, guys, they're all awesome answers and all correct. So Jordo, that was a good point. So if you've got a client who you've had for a while and you've been dieting them down and they've had a really good shift in body composition over the 13 weeks, they're signing up for their second package and they're like, okay, I'm nice and lean now. Body fat's where I want it. I want to now focus on building some muscle mass, but they're a little concerned about putting too much body fat back on. So the macronutrient that's going to have the least spillover into excess fat mass would be protein. So you can actually start by driving protein up a little higher because the actual thermic effect of digesting and breaking down the protein is quite expensive. So that can be, if you've got a client who's a little concerned about fat mass coming out of a shred, bringing driving protein up with as slightly higher in the mix of macros can sometimes be a good thing.
Yeah, for sure. I was in my example, I was more referencing like when we're deep into a building phase, you know what I mean? Say we're at 5,000 calories and we've done the build there. Protein would need to come down and make way for the excess calories I'm putting in the form of carbs. Correct.
So that reminds me about the other point I was going to make, which these are just things that what you were talking about set me off onto a few little tangents. So for me, because I would be considered advanced in terms of my training age. So I've been lifting weights, consistently for like 13 years. So I'm sort of at my genetic potential for how much muscle I can make. The amount of breakdown and protein synthesis that I generate from a workout isn't really that much. It's not like I'm a beginner and I'm still growing and building lots of muscle really quickly. So my requirements for a high level of like a top end protein intake aren't really there because I'm not breaking down huge amounts of tissue and I'm not I don't have huge protein synthesis requirements. So I just keep mine nice and steady. And like you were saying, Jordo, use the carbohydrates and the fats. The carbs have that nice protein sparing effect and focus on the other macronutrients. And so the converse is also true, guys. So when we're working with a new client and someone who's like a beginner and has a young training age, and they're in that honeymoon spot where they can they're training, they're building muscle and they're burning fat and everything's happening at the same time, they've actually got a lot of protein synthesis going down. They're breaking a lot of tissue. Their recovery and adaptation cycle after a workout's much longer. So they can benefit from even higher levels of protein. So if you've got a client and you get them started and they're like super keen and they're training 4 or 5 times a week and they're all in and they're like a robot and they want to grow, driving there, like while still keeping the energy balance where it needs to be, driving their protein high can actually they can actually use a higher protein target because there's so much new growth going on. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. So then the other factor that I take in thinking about minimum and maximum ranges is also thinking about what's their lifestyle like, what's their current diet like, how realistic is it to get them to eat this much protein first up, right? So that'd be one of the things that I factor in as well.
Yeah, so if you've got someone who just munches on carbs all day, you'd probably be better off starting at a lower protein and building them up to the higher protein over time, just for compliance.
Correct, exactly. Start them off with something they can actually succeed with. And then as they start training harder and developing work capacity, bump up the protein as you go. Yeah. All right. Any questions on protein, guys? No. That's good. You all had good answers to all that. That's nice to hear. Okay, so we got into carbs. So what are carbohydrates? We know that they're sugar molecules, essentially. They make up one of the three main macronutrients. We went through the types of carbohydrates. Let's get in here. Okay, so we've got the sugars and the starches. And we went through complex and simple carbohydrates. So we know complex carbs are those that we find more in the whole food sources. So in the rice and potatoes and grains, fruits and things like that. Simple sugars are usually the processed sugars. So these are refined sugars, refined starches and things that have had all their fiber and the nutrients stripped away in the processing, in the process of actually manufacturing them. So we call them more simple sugars. So that's the basic overview of the carbs we did. Let's get down to why they are important. Okay. Josh, why do you think carbohydrates are important? Or how would you explain to your client why carbohydrates are important?
Well, yeah, they give you energy.
Yes.
Good for like good for like your fiber and all that stuff as well.
Correct.
For your digestive system and all that.
Very good.
Yeah, that's about it. I got off the top of my head.
Yeah. Very good. Two good answers. Bailey?
What I usually say is definitely carbohydrates will help with our energy levels throughout the day. I definitely explain how carbohydrates also help and fill out our glycogen storage, which is what we want before a training session and what we want to refill after a training session. And we need carbohydrates for performance. So if you want a good performance in the gym, you do want to rely on carbohydrates sometimes.
Yes. Awesome. So if your client then asks you, if they say, so what's the difference between glycogen and carbohydrates? Like, how would you explain that to them?
That's a great question. That's a great question.
So when you eat a carbohydrate, your stomach, your digestive system will start breaking it as it digests it down. It breaks the more complex sugar down into more simple sugars and down into the glucose, the sucrose, all those sorts of simple sugars that are the base form, right? And so glucose is the primary energy source, the primary sugar molecule that the body uses for energy. It's the energy source that the muscles use for contraction and recovery and all that kind of stuff. So the glycogen storage that you're talking about, which is exactly correct. You want your glycogen stores nicely loaded to train. You want to replenish them after training. Glycogen is just the form of it's actually what when the cell goes through the process of glycolysis and utilizes the glucose molecule for energy. Glycogen is the end product of that, but it's a simple form of sugar.
Okay.
Yeah, cool. That's cool. Dana, when you're talking to your clients about carbs, what do you tell them as to their importance?
Well, I normally just tell them that they're the main energy source we need, just like every day, and also just especially with training performance.
Yes.
And then I would just break down, like we have like simple carbs and complex carbs.
Yeah. Nice. Jordo, anything to add to the carbohydrate mix?
Yeah, pretty much what the others said. Sorry, I missed some of it. I was moving location.
Mhm.
Yeah, pretty much the importance. So obviously I talk a little bit about muscle sparing as well, because I get a few clients that come in and say, oh, carbs, you know what I mean? Scared.
Yeah.
So just say, well, look, actually, carbs are going to protect your lean mass. I talk about the energy, not probably in as much depth as what was just spoken of there. I try to keep it as simple as possible.
Yeah.
Look, it's important for energy. It is a quick way to get energy as well, protects lean muscle mass, and I just keep it very basic, just enough to put the fear out.
Yes. Mate, the muscle sparing is really interesting. So if they ask about that, how do you break that down?
I don't usually get asked to go into it further, to be honest.
Yeah, fair enough.
I would say, look, the way I would say it to them is, look, if you're not eating any carbs, you go and you push your limits in the gym. Your body needs to take energy from somewhere. It's going to start breaking down that lean mass and converting into energy to function. By putting the carbs in there, you're going to stop that from happening. I almost say like it acts as a barrier, if you will.
Yes.
So instead of breaking down the muscle and using that as energy, it's got that barrier there that it's going to take instead. Yeah,
mate. Nice. Very nice. All right, guys, that's really cool. So it's the primary energy source for the body. It's the primary energy or the preferred energy source for the brain. Josh, as you said, a source of fiber, which is really important. And it's one of the things, like getting, if you've got a client that comes in, general population, young training age, genuine fat loss client, has a lot of fat mass, like a restricted carbohydrate diet or a low carb diet, those diets can be super effective for people like that. And like when I was working at Clean Health, our systems were all based around low carbohydrate diets for this for the initial transformation block. But one of the things that would always come up with someone who switches to a low carb diet would be slow transit time for their digestive system, sometimes constipation, stuff like that. So that's one of the challenges. You sort of have to you can supplement with fiber, have lots of fruits and lots of vegetables and vegetable material to get that going. But that's one of the things that one of the great things about carbohydrates is that source of fiber and the support to the digestive system. So enhanced recovery, fueling athletic performance, supports hypertrophy. So this comes down to what Jordo was talking about with muscle sparing and protein sparing as well. So if you have calories there from carbohydrates, then the body can use those carbohydrates as the energy source and leave the protein over to repair muscle tissue and build and recover and stuff like that. All good?
No.
Any questions on carbs, the importance of carbs? No, all good.
I will say that's why I'm not a fan of keto.
Yeah. I mean, have you had clients do that?
I've had a few clients come in who have either tried keto, like lost a bunch of weight, then put a bunch of weight back on. I've had clients come in just from a pure fear of like carbs altogether. And I always go down this road of, okay, here are all the things you're missing out on by doing that. Yeah, 100%. Look, in the certainly in the bodybuilding world, like it's a very simple way to go about it is basically to set protein, have the minimal amount of fat, and then just drive as many carbohydrates into an individual as you possibly can, for all those reasons. So that's certainly a method that's super cool. Okay, so the primary energy source for the body. So carbohydrates are broken down into sugar molecules like glucose and used as fuel in all the cells, the tissues, the organs, and all systems of the body. So it's kind of like the protein, it's used in everything. But as Jordo was saying, if you don't take in dietary carbohydrates, your body will find other ways to produce it. So, and one of those ways can be to break down muscle tissue and convert those amino acids into sugars. Gluconeogenesis is that process, and use that as the energy source, because it's going to need carbs at some point. Excess glucose is stored in the liver and muscle tissue and used as fuel later on.
So if you have, in terms of meal timing and carbohydrate timing around workouts, there's different ways you can do it. But basically, if you've eaten some sort of carbohydrate in between the last workout and your next workout, there will be enough glycogen loaded to support that workout. So it doesn't necessarily have to be proximal to the workout. Doesn't have to be immediately before it, but that can certainly be a good time to have them. But wherever you space them, the body will store a certain amount of glycogen and have that on hand. A lot of it's in the liver, a lot of it's in muscle tissue. Makes sense?
Yep.
Cool. Okay. So with the ranges, as we sort of went through last week, I don't know. I'll start with you, Jordo. So do you actually work with ranges when you're assigning carbohydrates?
What I do is I set the protein first, and then I set the carbs up second, and then I use the remainder of my calories to fill in with carbs.
Yeah. So set protein, set fats, and then just whatever's left over.
I don't use a specific range, just whatever's left over to fill out the amount of calories that I want. Yeah.
So that's how I do it as well. We've got the ranges in there because this is one of the questions that Mick wants you guys to be able to answer. So I would explain it like that. I would say I set calories for the client. I assign them protein, give them the fats that they need. Whatever calories are left over, I'll give them to carbohydrates. Where this can start to move around a little bit is with athletes, both competitors who would be, in a bulking phase or a growth or some period of surplus, a block of surplus, and athletes that play sports and physical performance. And that's when you can start playing around with some ranges. So when I actually think about it and look at the carbohydrates that I'm assigning to people, in terms of fat loss and body recomp, I could go, 1.5 grams per kilo body weight. I could go even lower than that. If it was a super low carb diet and they're literally just having plants and vegetables, then it would be, they might be less than 100 grams of carbs a day. So it might be as low as that. And then for athletic performance, anywhere between 5 to 10 grams of carbs per kilo of body weight. But I guess the most important thing there is just to know to get the calories right, as we talk about, get protein set up, get the fats assigned, and then whatever's left over, we fill in with carbs. All good?
Yep.
Cool. All right. So fats. Let's have a look at the fats. All righto. Josh, if a client asks you about fats, how do you explain what they are?
This is probably the one that I least know about. All I know about fats is that it helps with brain function and hormones. Helps regulate
Very good.
Hormones.
Very
That's
good.
all
So,
I know, really.
do you know how or why they help with hormones?
Nah, I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, that's cool. We'll have a look at it. But basically, fatty acids are used for cholesterol, to support cholesterol in the body. And cholesterol forms the basis of a lot of hormones, particularly all the sex hormones, testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, all that kind of stuff. So it's fats play a role sort of 2 steps back from the production of hormones. You need fats for cholesterol, and you need cholesterol to build hormones.
Cool.
Makes
What would
sense?
happen if one person just didn't eat any bit of fat at all?
No
Like,
fat at all?
Yeah, what would happen?
I think what would happen is over time they would develop an array of chronic health issues. So I think they would start they'd probably get very lethargic. They'd probably get brain fog, joint pain. I imagine that the chance for a disease and immune system support would go down as well. So, yeah, it's a very good question. It's kind of like if someone doesn't have enough protein, they'll be fine for a while, but then the energy levels, performance, and everything just starts to drop. So I think if you had no dietary fat at all, it would be hard to get no dietary fat. But it's a valid question. Jordo, what do you know about that?
Yeah. So I knew that they are responsible for, well, play a hand in the production and upkeep of hormones.
Yeah.
Through obviously the cholesterol, which is important.
But do you know what do you reckon would happen if someone had no fat at all?
Yeah, well, hormones would start shutting down. They wouldn't work optimally first, and then properly second. Yeah, your whole body function would just shut down over time.
Yeah, I guess that's what I reckon. It would take time, but it would be like this chronic thing, I think, where you would just get continually sicker and sicker and everything would just shut down.
Yeah, you'd eventually die just from your body shutting down.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Bailey, how do you explain fats to your clients?
Yes, to be honest, I'm exactly like Josh. It's one of my least confident ones, but straight away when they ask for it, or I give a reason for why we're having it, is for hormonal health and brain health.
Yeah.
And usually the ranges I usually go for is about 1 gram per body weight.
Yeah. Yeah.
In depth, I'm not too confident about fats, but I just do go over that. It's important for hormones, the production of hormones and brain health.
Yeah. Dana, what are your thoughts?
With fats, if I was explaining it to a client, I normally again would just say it's for hormonal health, and then also for your good cholesterol. Yes.
Okay. Cool. All right. Let's have a little look at it. So, as we know, it's one of the 3 main macronutrients. It's essential for health, a dense source of energy. But basically, every cell in the human body is coated by a lipid layer, so an actual layer of fat. And that's for lots of reasons. It's to create a barrier. It's also very good at letting chemical reactions occur on the outside of the cell and things to go in and out of the cell. But essentially, you're made like all of your cells need fatty acids to function well and be healthy and to grow. So fats are essential in that sense, in that very basic sense, is that every cell in the body needs them. So that's always a good place to start when I'm talking to my clients. Let's have a look at, we'll stick with why fats are important. So an energy source, supports cell growth and function, supports absorption of nutrients. So there's lots of nutrients and micronutrients, phytochemicals and things like that are fat soluble. So they need some sort of fatty acid in the diet to actually assimilate all the benefit out of those nutrients. Supports the cholesterol production, which is what we were talking about, Josh. And so hormone production comes out of cholesterol. So that's exactly what you were talking about. They stabilize blood sugar. So they leave the gut a little slower than, say, a fast carb like a sugar. And they can slow the absorption of macronutrients after they've been broken down into the bloodstream and stabilize the amount of insulin in the blood, so they keep blood sugar levels more stable for longer. And satiety, so they're good for curbing appetite and keeping people full as well. So any questions on all of that?
Yeah, so would you say it's fair to say obviously carbs are fast release and fats would be slower release energy?
Yes, that would absolutely be. Yeah, carbs are certainly faster than fats for sure. Yeah. They also get, in terms of storage, it's a little different. So carbs, that process of glycolysis I was talking about, where a glucose molecule becomes glycogen. Carbohydrates go through a few extra chemical reactions to turn them into energy, whereas fat, if you think about two drops of oil, if you put a drop of oil in a cup of water and you put another drop of oil and they come together and they kind of go gloop and become one. So there's very little that has to happen with dietary fat getting stored as body fat. So that's the one which, you probably actually don't need to talk to your clients about that, because then they get worried about eating too much fat. Yeah. But it does get stored easily, and it's a dense source of energy. Anything else to add, or any questions on role of fats?
I've got a question. So I forgot what it's called exactly, but I've had clients before come to me and they've gotten, I think, their gallbladder removed.
Right, right.
They
Yeah.
can't process fats as efficiently.
Hmm.
So what does that exactly do to the body when you can't process the fats properly? And then what should you do for that to help support everything else?
Okay, so the issue that you're talking about is obviously so the gallbladder produces bile. So without the bile production, it's harder to break down that volume of fatty acids. I've never had a client that's actually had that happen, so I'm not exactly sure what the protocol would be. I think that would be Jordo, do you know?
Yeah, so essentially you just limit the fats. Wouldn't give as much fats to them as you would say if they had their gallbladder.
Yeah.
Because if you overload the fats, they're not going to be able to process it properly. It's just going to cause all sorts of issues. So essentially you just want to be smart about how much fat you're giving them, just like you would be smart about how much carbs or sugars you'd be given to a diabetic.
Yeah, so I guess you would start at the minimum end, so like 1.5, yeah, 0.5 to 1 gram per kilo of body weight. So you set them on a low amount, and I guess you'd be looking at the types of fats as well. What kind of fats made up those few grams they had? So like you wouldn't want them eating huge amounts of trans fats, for instance.
Yeah.
So let's actually do that. Let's have a look at the types of fat. So we've got saturated fats, unsaturated fats, and trans fats. And the unsaturated fats, we have monounsaturated and polyunsaturated. So I'm going to get up a couple of diagrams.
Pictures.
Yeah, pictures make it easy. Share screen.
Visual learner, Josh.
Yeah. Oh, actually, yes. Could you, like, when you're explaining it, are you good like at drawing? Could you, like, when you're describing like molecules and stuff, like joining together, like draw it? Explain it.
Yeah, I mean, I could, but I don't know how I would do that on the screen.
Yeah. Okay.
But so what can you guys see at the moment? Can you see a diagram on fats?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So we'll start with the trans fats. So there are some trans fats found in food. There are some trans fats in beef and dairy products, but very, very small amounts, like trace amounts. So it's nothing to really worry about. But essentially, when they go through the process of when they hydrolyze fatty acids for mass production and to stabilize them, they become trans fats. And really, the kind of fats that you get in fried foods and like actual trans fats serve no real positive purpose in the body at all. So there's nothing good that can be said about trans fats. I don't think I think as an actual molecule, a trans fat looks kind of like a saturated fat, but it doesn't function that way. It has no positive function in the body, so it's nothing but inflammatory, as far as I'm aware. Jordo, what are your thoughts on trans fats?
Outside of they taste good, they're shit and they should be avoided.
Yeah, they should be avoided at all costs. Okay, so your saturated fats, when you think about saturated fats, think about animal fats. So all of when you're calculating calories and you're setting people a protein target, within the protein that you give them, there'll always be some amount of fat. If it's a chicken breast or a lean, like an eye fillet, then the fat content will be quite low, but the fat that's in there will be saturated. And saturated fats are fine, like they're very good for you. I guess the overall thing with fats is to have a nice balance. So you want a nice balance of saturated, unsaturated. So a healthy amount of saturated fats are good. Vegetable fats also fall into this category. So coconut oil is a saturated fat. It also has a lot of health benefits. So, coconut oil in appropriate amounts is good for a client. Then we have the unsaturated fats. And so the two forms, polyunsaturated and monounsaturated, that refers to the actual structure of the bonds of the fatty acid. So the polyunsaturated have multiple bonds, 2 bonds, poly, 2, multiples. The monounsaturated fat has the 1 bond, mono 1. And these are what we typically think about as the healthy fats that we can encourage our clients to have in larger quantities. But like a nice balance, like an easy way to think about it is if you're having 100 grams of fat in a day, you could have 33 like thirds, basically, like a third monounsaturated, a third polyunsaturated, a third saturated, and then you've got a fairly nice blend of fats. So any questions on that or anything to add?
Yeah. What's tallow/lard and ghee
So ghee is
in the saturated fats?
In the saturated fats,
animal fats.
yeah. Ghee is sorry.
Isn't it kind of like butter?
It's like butter. It's a butter. It's used a lot in Indian cooking. It's just gone through, I think, maybe a slightly different processing pathway. I don't think it's maybe not as processed as butter. Like if you see ghee, it's a bit more gelatinous and softer. It's closer to an oil than a butter kind of thing, but it's like a form of animal fat. Tallow and lard. Lard is like actual animal fat, like lard off pork and stuff like that. And I think tallow might even be out of bones. Not sure, Jordan. Do you know?
No, I don't know.
No. Animal fats. Yeah. Does that help you, mate?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yes. So those are the main type of fats. I've got another diagram which talks about sort of the health benefits. Let's have a look at that. Okay. This one.
Oof.
Okay.
I gotta run, Tommy.
You gotta go, mate. All good, man.
Yeah,
No dramas.
Yeah.
I'll wrap it up shortly anyway.
All right.
I'll talk to you next week.
All right, sweet.
Thanks, mate.
All right, sweet. See you next week.
See you, mate. Bye-bye. Bye. So this diagram just, I guess, it goes into a little more detail into the actual structure of the fats. So trans fats, increased risks of heart disease. As we're saying, there's basically no benefit to having the trans fats at all. And generally speaking, we think about the unsaturated fats, the monounsaturated and the polyunsaturated as more of the healthier fats. That's all. I guess that's all fairly straightforward. Are there any questions on that, or is that pretty good in terms of the types of fat?
Pretty straightforward.
Pretty straightforward. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. We'll go back to the. Okay. Seen the mind map? Yep. Okay. So we've been why fat's important. What are fats? So the ranges per kilo of body weight. So the ones that I would go off would be 0.5 to 1.5 times body weight in kilos, typically for general pop clients. And the asterisk there is if you're doing like a high fat diet or a ketogenic diet, then those numbers can get higher. And like with a ketogenic diet, fats are the highest percentage of your calories will be coming from fats. And like for someone to truly get into keto, a lot of people have to have quite low protein on that diet as well. So they'll be eating quite a lot of fat. Any questions on those ranges? Yeah, that all makes sense. Have you guys had any? I know, Jordan, you have. Bailey and Dana, have you guys had any keto experience with doing a ketogenic diet with clients?
I actually haven't.
No.
I actually haven't.
Yeah. It's not I've probably done it maybe 2 or 3 times, only because the client really wanted to do it.
Yeah.
And it's I mean, I wouldn't say it's any more. I've seen it be any more effective than just a normal calorie controlled diet, because it's so restrictive. and it seems to be so hard for them to stay in ketosis. Like if they're actually monitoring their urine or their blood, it's a lot of work to get in keto, and can be, you know, you slip up, it's hard and you're out of it straight away. So a balanced diet tends to be probably the way to go. All right, guys. Well, that'll probably 20 past 4. That'll probably do us for the day. Any questions on anything that we've covered?
No, but I do have a question to bring up.
Yes.
How you would explain it to a client. So if a client asked you, what is cortisol? How would you put it into words?
So if a client asked me what is cortisol, so
yeah,
I would say
insulin as well. How would you put it into words?
Okay.
From the perspective of how you would explain it.
So we'll start with cortisol. So I would say cortisol is a stress hormone. It's produced by the adrenal glands when the stress response has been initiated by the human. And so whether you've been, so in terms of training, when you start training and you start exercising and moving physically, there is a low level induction of the stress response, and your adrenal glands start producing hormones, and cortisol is one of those hormones. And it's really good for sharpness of your brain, increasing work capacity and blood flow and heart rate, and it gets you in a position to act and sharpen you up. So it can be a really useful hormone in that respect. So when it's produced in smaller acute doses, really good. If you're super stressed out all the time and you have a very stressful existence and your stress response is always bumbling away, and you're producing low level amounts of cortisol chronically, then you're producing too much of that hormone, and that's when it can start to cause an issue, having elevated cortisol levels. So primarily it's a stress hormone, and it's the response to the body being in stress. And really the important thing is to actually manage stress appropriately. Stress is good in small doses, bad chronically.
Okay, cool. Awesome.
That makes sense?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Insulin.
Yeah.
Insulin is a hormone. So if a client asks me about insulin, I'd say it's a hormone that your body uses to actually regulate what's in your blood. So when you eat a meal, say you have a mixed meal with some protein, some carbohydrates, and some fats, that process of digestion will break down those macronutrients, will break down those foods into the macronutrients. Those nutrients will go off into your bloodstream, and they'll be circulating around, used for energy, used to support the function of organs and do what they do. And insulin is the hormone that is directing where the energy that's in the blood, where the energy in the blood actually ends up and goes. And it helps drive particularly glycogen and glucose out of the bloodstream and into cells. So it's like it can be described as a transporter molecule, like a transporter hormone, like it transports glycogen from the blood into a muscle cell, but it's really just regulating the amount of energy that's in the blood at any one time.
Okay, cool. All right.
Yeah. And so if you eat a lot and it responds mostly to carbohydrates. So if you eat, say you drink a big can of Coke or like 2 cans of Coke, you have a lot of simple sugar that gets absorbed really fast. So you got a heap of energy hits the bloodstream really quickly. The insulin response to that's going to be high. You're going to get a high glycemic load, like a high insulin response to get rid of all that stuff out of the blood and get it where it needs to be. You eat like a sweet potato with some brown rice, the process of digestion is much slower. There's a lot more fiber in that meal. So the glycogen's dripping into the bloodstream a lot slower. So the insulin production just has to be moderate.
Okay, cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool. Good questions. Good questions. Jordo, anything you'd like to add to insulin, or what was the other one we looked at? Cortisol, anything?
No, I think I took more out of that one than I can add.
Okay, cool. Awesome. All right, guys, you're all legends.
Thanks,
well done.
mate.
We'll talk again next week.
Awesome. Have a good
Cool.
week.
Thanks, guys.
See you, mate.
Bye.